Hi, this is our second lesson on what to cook. We're going to be making rice pudding. The hardest part is actually the rice, and I trust that you already actually know how to make it. You need a pot, rice, and water. The most important thing in this step is to make the pot large enough to contain the water and the rice, because if it boils over, you'll make a mess on the stove. Now the recipe I'm using calls for 2½ cups of cooked rice. I'm sure there's a way to figure out exactly how much that is, but I don't bother, I just use the leftover rice. So just remember that it's a ratio of 2 to 1, 2 cups water, 1 cup rice, unless you're doing brown rice, in which case I recommend you look it up. So I'm putting in 4 cups because I actually don't mind having leftover rice. And we'll boil the water first. You don't want to put the rice in before it's boiling. You'll actually lose a bit of boiling time, possibly nutrients. So we'll just let it boil first. When you see bubbles at the bottom of the pan, you can go ahead and add your rice. And then stir it occasionally, especially if it's boiling over. Our water is starting to boil, so I'm going to add the rice. And again, that's 2 cups because I have 4 cups in here. It is helpful to stir it, or else it will get a little clumpy. And you just let that boil, or rather simmer. You can put a lid on it. You just want the rice to absorb all of the water. Okay, so my rice is done cooking. It's basically, there's no water left in it. So I'm going to measure out 2½ cups of the cooked rice. And stick it in my crock pot. There's 1. There is 2. And there is 3. And we're going to add some evaporated milk. It's 1 can. Well, a 12 fluid ounce can, or 1½ cups. It would be helpful to shake the can before you open it, so that you don't get a lining of dried cream on the edges. I've already shaken it, so no worries. Okay. We're also going to add about ½ cup of brown sugar or white sugar. I prefer brown. It has a more molasses taste to it. And I don't bother packing it. I'm aiming for less sweet anyway. Okay, and we also have 3 tablespoons of butter. I already measured it, so there you go. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This is imitation, but actually real vanilla is better. That's 1 and 2. I'll have to let that dry off. And then we have, actually I recommend using nutmeg. I don't have any nutmeg on hand, so I'm going to use mace. It's kind of similar to nutmeg. It's a spicy, like used for sweet spices. So I'm going to use about 3/4 of a teaspoon of that. But again, for nutmeg, just ½ to a teaspoon of that. And I'm actually really fond of cinnamon and cloves, so I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, well, rounded, of cinnamon. And half a teaspoon of cloves. Cloves are pretty strong, so you don't need too much. It's probably more like a quarter. Okay, a quarter of cloves. Okay, just stir that up a little bit here. Now for an old-fashioned style of rice pudding, I recommend adding raisins. About half of a cup of raisins. I don't have exactly half a cup of raisins, so I'm going to make up the difference with dried cranberries. And then after I add these, the last thing will be 3 eggs. You can beat them beforehand and just add them in. Okay, so I've added the raisins and a couple of cranberries. You don't want to add too many of the cranberries because they're actually more tart. And then I'm going to add the eggs. Now I don't like using more dishes than I can help, so I just crack the eggs in the evaporated milk can, which we have emptied, and beat them in there and then transfer them to the slow cooker. There you go. Okay, and then you stir all of this up. And set that in the actual cooking part of the crock pot and let that cook for high 2 hours or low 4 to 6 hours. And you should stir it after the first hour, just to make sure everything is mixed up nicely. So I've been cooking it on low for 4 hours. It can at times get a little dried out if you leave it in the crock pot, even if it's turned off, which is actually what I did. So what you can do is just stir in like a 1/4 cup of milk and it will turn out just fine. And that's it.